Very common question people get is, what book of the Bible should you start with? You buy somebody a Bible as a gift, they're a new believer, and you want them to start reading the Bible and you want them to have a good first experience, like deep diving into scriptures. Number one most common recommended book definitely is the Gospel of John. That's the one that people always say, oh, start by reading John. I don't agree. I think the best first book of the Bible to read is the Gospel of Luke. It's a much easier account to read. It's longer, granted, it's more detailed, it tells more of the story, but what I really like about Luke is that you can tell who's talking. If you read right now, go to John chapter 3, you can see that Jesus is having this more or less argument with Nicodemus. He argues really for the next 8 chapters. He's always arguing with somebody in the Gospel of John, but in John chapter 3, you can't tell where Nicodemus says this, then Jesus says this to him, and then it shows off, and you can't tell if Jesus is talking or if John is giving commentary. You really can't tell. So it's a little bit harder to follow to me than Luke. Luke, you always tell who's talking. You always tell what's happening. It's very much a story being told. There's some theology in it, but this is more or less, this is what's happened. To me, Luke is a really great way to get a whole picture of what Jesus was doing. And of course, that leads right into the book of Acts. And so if you read Luke and Acts together as your first sit down with the Bible, that's just a nice narrative. It's really easy to understand. The second thing I would do at that point, instead of reading the rest of the epistles, I would go all the way back to the Old Testament and read 1 Samuel, the story, of course, of Samuel and of King Saul. And then that would lead you right through to read 2 Samuel, story of King David. And I think really King David is so important to understand this whole kind of sweep of history and how God had this people that he called way back when. In fact, I would not only start with Luke and then go to Acts and then go backward to 1 and 2 Samuel, I would then go backward again to Genesis and read the story of the patriarchs. And I think that if you read that, you'd have this really nice big picture of the kind of, again, the sweep of history, the sweep of covenant, of the history of God's promises to his people. So that's the order. I wouldn't recommend John. I would say read John, but not first. I think the first best book to read, Luke, then Acts, of course, by the same author. The most important thing is that you read it and that you read it every single day. You want to hide his word in your heart. You want to start every day with some time in the word. Some people say one verse. If one verse is all you got, well, let's say one chapter. Let's just try one chapter. And then maybe you could do 2-3 chapters a day. But as a believer, you need to be on a continuous project every single day to read the Bible. I do it from beginning to end. Right now, I happen to be in John chapter 4, having started in Genesis. Many times I've gone through it. As soon as I get to the end of Revelation, I'm going to start right back at the beginning. The first time, if I was telling you to start right now, I would tell you to start at the beginning of Luke. Great, great gospel, nice, clean narrative. But again, make sure whatever you do, just read it. Wherever you're going to read it and read it every day. Thanks so much. God bless.